The Bones and Bobbins podcast is now on Patreon. Would you like access to bonus episode, digital extras, exclusive merch, and more? Join us in the Curiosity Shop at patreon.com/Bones and Bobbins.
Your generous support helps make the show happen and will also earn you our very eternal gratitude and entry into our private Patreon-only Facebook group.
Which is super fun.
It's true. It's where you want to be.
Definitely. Like, no drama. Just creepy, crafty weirdos sharing creepy, crafty weirdo fun.
Yes, you can come hide there when your family becomes too much.
Yes. Yes, you can look at the things that we find at 3 o'clock in the morning when we can't sleep. Or bonus photos of our cats. Or random cemeteries that I pass.
Great Aunt Frances with lights in her chest cavity, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. And if you don't know what that is and you are a new listener, I'm sorry and you're welcome. In a dusty old shop on a forgotten old street, you'll find two witches with books 3 boxes deep. Next to rusty old needles and faded red thread, you'll come in for yarn, but leave with pigments instead. Whether poisons or patterns, we're always discreet, where creepy and crafty and morbidity meet. Welcome to the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Hello, morbid makers. We are your slightly creepy,
Mildly disconcerting,
somewhat sinister,
delightfully discomposed,
opaquely odd,
merrily morbid,
marvelously misanthropic hosts.
And this is Bones and Bobbins, Season 2, Episode 23, From Mary Sachs to Coco Sucks.
She does, it turns out. I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Very Serious Crafts podcast, and I go by she and her.
And I'm Natalie from Uberdark Designs, an official true crime creative. My pronouns are she, her.
Yay!
Yay!
Let me tell you what I've been doing this week.
Yay!
I've decided to dive headfirst into genealogy research.
Nice.
Yeah, and I found out, in a complete surprise to me, that multiple branches of my family, like, as in grandparent, great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent direct lines, are colonial residents, and, like, way colonial, like, late 1600s.
Oh.
At least. I have not actually, there are 2 branches that I have not found the where they come over part yet. And one of them was a Revolutionary War captain, and he is my 5th great-grandfather.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I've been emailing today with the Daughters of the American Revolution about getting that particular part of my genealogy confirmed and joining the DIR.
That's fun.
Yeah, I'm pretty pleased because it's one of those things where I have not allowed myself to dive into genealogy because I knew it would take over my life. Mm-hmm. But this is sort of a little reward for having finished my latest book, so I'm pretty excited.
Yay! Oh, I have on my list. We've got some genealogy, man. We have some very, like, one side of my family is just tragedy after tragedy. I would have made such a wonderful Victorian chick because I'd have been, like, just in constant mourning.
I don't understand how people weren't.
Right.
constant mourning.
Right.
Given all of the rules based on how close you were to God knows who. I feel like it would be very difficult to not be in mourning at all times.
And I'm hoping that you would have got like a cheat sheet or a guidebook, because I would have inevitably have not done it correctly.
I think maybe your lady's maid had to know, because that was the person dressing you.
Oh my God, I would not have done well with a lady's maid. I don't know.
I would have just gotten up to hijinks with a lady's maid.
Built-in partner in crime.
Yep. Matter of fact, I think that I would like a lady's maid, not because I want anything done, but because there would be a built-in person who would just go along on my shenanigans.
Yes.
And, I mean, I am, of course, assuming that this is a person who I like and would want to go along on my shenanigans. So.
Well, that's super fun. I have hashing out some genealogy. It's not even hashing out genealogy. It's hashing out the crimes involved in my genealogy, which is...
Yeah, the only crimes that I have found thus far involve adultery.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which is technically a crime.
It is.
Yep. And my great-grandfather used to play minor league baseball with some of Al Capone's boys.
Oh, that's fun.
In Chicago, yeah. So, that's a thing.
That is a thing.
Yep.
Weird fact, when I was little, I went through a phase where I wanted to be a mobster wife when I grew up. But quickly realized that I was far too lippy.
Well, that would either really work or really not work.
Yeah. And I don't even know what sparked it, but I was like, and to this day, one of the only, I have never seen any of the Real Housewives of blah, 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 but I have watched The Mob Wives.
Oh, I didn't even know that existed, and now we know what I'm doing later.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It was amazing. R.I.P. Big Angie.
I know a mob prince, I think is maybe what they are called. A kid of a family head. But they are not publicly the kid of a family head, so...
That makes sense.
Yes. They are carefully protected, as they are not in the life. So, but, in a good way, the family is taking care of them and making sure that they don't get involved, or they don't have to be involved in anything, which is cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, as cool as you can get when you're talking about some truly sketchy goings-on.
Right. Definitely. There's always, from my experience and knowledge, a strong moral code when it comes to family, though.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah, I respect that.
Yep.
Do you know what else you gotta respect? All of our fantastic Curiosity Shop members over on Patreon. And
that is what I was going to say.
And this part of the show is episode show entertainment segment. This right here is where we would give a totally normal and not at all creepy welcome should you join us over there.
On the Patreon?
Yeah, on the Patreons.
Yeah, you should do that. Because, you know why? It's because you are the best.
The best.
And we would totally go explore hidden old graveyards in the woods with you while looking up the final resting places of our ancestors.
Absolutely. And I live in 20-degree weather right now. I'd totally be out there with you. And
yeah, New York still isn't cold, so.
Yep, we're starting with it cold. And if you want in on this fun, not only do you get some really great surprises that we are now that deadlines and the holidays are just about to be over. We've got some surprises. You'll get a huge backlog of Patreon-only episodes, including next week.
That's true.
Where we talk from one runway to the next. And we make a good gift. And if you do try us out and you're like, yeah, maybe not so much, that's cool too. Like, we don't hold it against you. We
do hold it against that one reviewer who wrote the really weird and confusing review, though.
Right. If you're listening, human being that wrote that, I just have one question, and could you just drop
email us and give us context?
Yeah, I don't recall. I cuss a lot, but I don't think I've ever been accused of baby talk before.
Yeah,
so
me neither. It's a mystery.
It is a mystery.
It's a mystery. So,
yeah.
I don't think that person probably listens anymore, but if they do, we don't want to fight with you.
No,
we're just confused.
We are open. We are open to all kinds of input. If we fuck up a fact, we will gladly correct ourselves. We're human beings, man. We're fine with if you don't like us, we get that. If you have issues with us, and you let us know, we try to work on things. We're not perfect, and we don't think that we're perfect. We roll with that.
No.
Just confused.
I can't even get on the right page, literally.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, come join us or answer our mysterious universe questions.
Yes.
All of those things. Do you want to hear a story?
I totally want to hear a story.
Okay. I fell down this particular rabbit hole because my best friend went to a choir concert for a local gender-inclusive choir in New York and saw this woman who was wearing apparently the most amazing emerald green velvet cape that has ever existed in the history of the universe.
I mean, you had me at emerald velvet cape.
Yeah. Well, she suddenly became completely obsessed with the existence of that cape and went as far as to ask the woman to take a photo of the label.
Okay.
And, asked where she found it.
Right.
And the answer was an antique store. So, then later, the next day, my best friend came to my apartment and told me about this cape. And then it became both my goal and her goal to track down this particular cape, which we have not actually managed to do yet. For reasons that I'm not entirely sure about. It seems like it could be a bespoke item, but also that's not the kind of place where it came from. So I don't know. It's a mystery. Maybe you can help solve it.
Ooh.
But I have tracked down the creator of said Cape of Wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And her name is Mary Sachs. So I always like finding a fascinating, beloved local personality. And I find them to be very confusing and also very delightful because, you know how certain people have really outsized impacts on the town they're from, but then nobody's ever heard of them anywhere else?
We have a man that looks like Wolverine, and he is called the Milverine. And he is a beloved local Milwaukee figure. But if you weren't from Milwaukee, you'd be like, the what?
No. We have Speedo Guy from the general area that I grew up in. So shout out to anyone in and around South Haven, Michigan. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. Well, so Mary Sachs seems to be that kind of personality. And I'm not sure why she isn't better known outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where she is extremely well known. Because it's sort of unusual, at least for her time period, for a big local personality to have been a woman. But this big local personality was a woman and an entrepreneur. And I'm just I don't understand why I don't know her name.
Okay.
Mary Sachs was well known in Harrisburg, and her store and her family and her philanthropy are still well known there today. But as far as I can tell, she doesn't even have a Wikipedia page.
Really?
And yeah, but a piece of vintage fashion with her label sewn in fetches a real pretty penny on the vintage fashion scene, which is also weird.
That is weird.
I mean, it's not weird that something rare would be worth money, but it is strange to me that nobody is wondering about who this person is, or maybe they are and I just don't know what I'm talking about. But she seems to be sort of an unsung hero of early to mid 1900s fashion.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
that is super rare then.
Yeah. So her name and philanthropic giving is attached to many actually known things. She was a founding contributor to the Albert Einstein College of Medicine at Yeshiva University in New York City, which is not an unknown thing. She befriended Eleanor Roosevelt. She enabled the purchase of land for a Boy Scout camp that's very much still operating today. She even has a road ceremonially named for her, and her name is on a bunch of things at Jewish community centers. And
now I want to hug her.
Yeah, like she seems like a cool lady. And I kept looking for problematic tidbits that maybe were keeping her out of the public eye, but other than the general ingrained sexism of the time period,
well, I mean,
she doesn't.
I would think that it would not. Is it possible that it wasn't just the sexism, but also anti-Semitism too?
Oh, no, but I mean on her part. She waxes poetic about her only brother. And how excited the family was to have him arrive in a sea of sisters. Like, just stuff like that. But it absolutely is probably anti-Semitism, at least in part. But places like Yeshiva University, those are Jewish schools.
Right.
And, I mean, New York City has an awful lot of Jewish people here. Mm-hmm. So I feel like at least, and we're not that far away from Pennsylvania, we should know the name, but we don't.
Especially fashion related. You'd think that it would have, New York would have.
Yeah. Although I will get there. Though her iconic store has been long closed, the most recent photos of the area that I've seen still show an awning in place with her name emblazoned upon it.
Aww.
And it's maintained.
That's some respect there.
Yeah, and she obviously hasn't been forgotten, but it also doesn't seem like she's gotten the recognition she deserves. And given her success and larger impact on how people shop for ready-to-wear fashion, it surprises me that she isn't better known just based on that. Now, Mary was born in Lithuania on March 10th of 1888. And in 1892, when she was 4 years old, she came to the U.S. with her mother and siblings, joining her father, who had already moved to Pennsylvania a few years earlier in advance of the rest of the family. And for context, at the point where we pick up this story, I think it's important to keep in mind that Mary was an unmarried, immigrant, working-class Jewish woman opening a business in the midst of World War I in the shadow of the Spanish flu epidemic at a time when women couldn't yet vote. So that's a lot going on.
That is a lot going on, and that's a lot to be celebrated. I mean, that had been tough. I mean, she had to have faced a lot of hurdles for that.
And she did, but she was really creative in getting around them. So on September 6th, 1918, Mary Sachs opened her first women's clothing store in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. One of the websites for a scholarship in her name said that she was fired from another dress shop for being honest with a customer and then decided to open her own, which, given the rest of her story, makes a lot of sense. Her first store was located at 210 North 3rd Street, and her budget was very small. She started with a $6,000 business line of credit. And in 1918, there were 2 stock rooms and 6 fitting rooms, and the shop was 20 feet by 106 feet.
Okay.
So she's starting pretty small. Now, the way she makes this initial foray into business work is kind of amazing. So when she opened the store, there were, I think, 73 dressmakers and 10 women's clothing shops operating in the area.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a lot.
Yeah, and from the biography that I read that had the most in-depth information about her, which is Mary Sachs, Merchant Princess by Barbara Train Blank, that book said that because most of the businesses in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area at that time were run by Jewish immigrant families, that there was a lot of loyalty from the specifically working class Jewish public. And so it was really hard to jump into business because it was all about relationships at that time. And so, because she was a woman and was unmarried, and it was just her, like, she wasn't partnering with a man in any way, she often could not get clothing manufacturers in New York to sell to her.
Wow.
Because even in fashion at the time, it was men who were the business people who would be negotiating that sort of thing. And she refused to work with the local businessmen. She wanted it to be hers. And so what she did is kind of brilliant. Because there wasn't a lot of stock in her store at the time, she set her store up as a very personal service sort of thing, where each individual piece of clothing would be brought to you. And she built full ensembles, like foundation garments up. And it was very personal hand-to-hand service, so people couldn't see that there wasn't much on the rack. They could only see the personal service.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
That's
and
really
that
smart.
Exactly, and it would later be how Fifth Ave operated. I mean, that is absolutely, like, when I've been shopping for Emmy dresses and such, that is absolutely what still happens. You hang out someplace comfy and people bring you shit. And that seems to have come from her.
That's amazing.
And in order to get the business or the clothing manufacturers who wouldn't sell to her to sell to her, upon her opening, she bought $100 worth of flowers, which was a whole lot in 1918. Yeah. And she put names of congratulations that she wrote herself from the manufacturers, even the ones who would not sell to her. So when people came into the store, they saw these bouquets of flowers with handwritten notes from all of these manufacturers who absolutely did not send flowers. But according to the lore around this, one of the major women's clothing retailers in the area heard about it, went in and saw a clothing manufacturer that she bought from on that list and canceled all of her orders. And so that retailer, or that clothing manufacturer, then really needed to get rid of this inventory and sold to Mary.
I think I love her.
Yeah. And apparently also at some point, clothing merchants who were hearing this buzz about this new store came in and found their names written on these cards that they definitely did not send, on flowers they definitely did not buy, and were so embarrassed that they had not sent them that they started doing business with her. So
that's amazing.
Even if some of that is apocryphal, that's the oral history from the family.
It kind of fits, though. Like,
I kind of love it.
I absolutely love it, and it seems to fit her MO. Like, it seems to track.
Yeah. And so at this point, when she opened the store, she was renting from a local newspaper magnate, and who happened to cover largely the Jewish cultural happenings within the area, and decided to take a chance on her for reasons somewhat unclear to me, but he did. And according to the biography, Mary was then able to purchase the property, which is not the property with the address. This gets a little complicated because there was so much expansion and so much additional renting out on that block that was happening in rapid succession. But in 1920, she was able to purchase the property at 208 North 3rd Street outright, and then expanded into, further into the 210 North 3rd Avenue with cooperation from that building's owner.
That's amazing. So, I mean, just being a female owner of anything, let alone a building at that point, that's so impressive.
Yeah, it's so cool. And the timeline in the biography is a bit muddled, and because there is relatively little information outside of local historical societies and local museum exhibitions, it's sort of hard to really pinpoint all of the actual dates and addresses, but I'm going with what's in the biography, and I guess we'll just have to trust her. At this point in 1920, her store included not just a women's clothing department, but a shoe store, a lingerie department, a cosmetic counter, a jewelry store, and a beauty shop.
Wow.
She was a woman with a plan.
That's a female-centric department store if I've ever heard one.
Well, women were spending the money, much like they still are for families. And she had a real eye for what the market wanted. And she would describe her, I guess now, department store as, quote, a little piece of Fifth Avenue. And for those of you who might not know, Fifth Avenue is a very famous street for shopping in New York City.
But she's not related to the Saks Fifth Avenue Saks.
No. I don't think Saks Fifth Ave was there yet, but Bergdorf Goodman was. And sort of, it's that area just south of Central Park. There's an Apple store over there now.
Of course there is.
Yeah, it's the clear cube one. It's it's 24 hours, so it tends to be where I have to go in the middle of the night to buy a new computer when mine explodes. Yes. Anyway, back to Pennsylvania. She also, at this point, opened an additional store in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And then, starting in 1925, Mary began taking a trip that all of my friends who work in fashion take. She would first go to Europe annually to see the latest fashion trends, which now happen seasonally, but at the time it was annually. And she would visit New York weekly to visit clothing manufacturers. And that is still a thing, although there are relatively few people manufacturing in the garment district anymore.
I was going to say, sadly.
There are still some, though.
Which is great. I wish there were more.
Yeah, it's cool. And the businesses related to that are still there. So, like, there's a store where you go to get your underwires. There's a specialty store for basically everything.
Which I love.
like the 36th Street area. Yeah, it's very cool. By the 1950s, and this is jumping just a little bit ahead, but I like this to go along with a little piece of Fifth Avenue, a U.S. Senator named Edward Martin would describe her as, quote, the merchant princess, which I think is very cool.
It is very cool.
It seemed to be a compliment, not mocking. Like a recognition of what she built from having literally nothing. Right. Which is really impressive.
It's very impressive, yeah.
But even with her initial success, there would be hardship to overcome. On the evening of February 12th, 1931, a fire began in the beauty shop of her original Harrisburg store. And according to her biography, the fire caused $300,000 in damage, injured 12 firefighters, and destroyed the homes of 13 people who occupied apartments in the building.
Oh.
She must have had some amazing financial wizardry skills, because she collected only, I think, $53,000 in insurance. But according to a local paper, she built a $250,000 store to rise from the ashes.
Nice.
I'm not sure if that is literal, or if it was maybe talking about how the building looked. Maybe she's magical.
It could be literal. Well, I mean, and also...
I mean, it might be that the firms that she was working with clearly saw that she was a solid investment.
Right.
And that they would eventually get paid. I don't know.
I could see that a lot, especially because the Jewish community is so close-knit. They take care of each other. You know, it's not unlike the Amish community. You know what I mean? Where
this was well beyond that.
Wow.
At this point. Or at least, I'm not sure if the architects, they were local, and I'm not sure if they were also part of the Jewish community. But in the wake of the fire, she hired architects Laurie and Green to design the facade of the new building. And then she hired Eleanor Lemaire as the store's interior architect after seeing her work on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And Eleanor Lemaire is a fascinating woman in her own right, and she's going on the list of people to look further into. And her papers have been preserved, which is kind of cool.
That is very cool.
Yep. So Mary didn't roll the dice on this building. She rebuilt in a much less fire-friendly stone and steel. Her new building was also fully air-conditioned.
Ooh. She's fancy.
In 1932.
Wow.
I have no idea how that worked.
But it is so smart, because then you're going to spend longer there.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to choose to go there to get things because it's air conditioned.
Exactly. Well, there are many reasons that you, as a woman about Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, would choose to go there.
Right, but I'm saying that's an extra bonus.
Oh, yeah.
For anybody that was on the fence, or even that wouldn't normally travel far to go to someplace, would maybe travel a little further.
Well, Mary kept adding amenities because she knew that personalized face-to-face service was the thing that set her above and apart.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't really one to do anything by half, as you may have noticed. And her new store, when it opened on March 26th of 1932, in her triumphant return, that new store boasted 21 departments.
Wow.
Then, and this is where the more reasons why a lady about Harrisburg might go to here. 6 years later, she expanded again to include a nursery, which is fucking brilliant.
Smart. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Have you ever been in Saks with F?
No. Not the original, no.
So there are women's lounges, like, it's a whole thing. Mm-hmm. And you can still have the very old school New York experience. Like, I had a hell of a bra fitting there once. Yes. But the amenities like that, there's still, like, signage from that era of things.
So great.
Yeah, so there was
She was brilliant, especially for being a single woman.
Yeah, and she is still a single woman. She never married. So she, like I said, expanded to include a nursery, a children's shoe shop, and a slipper shop, and then 2 trousseau rooms, which I find to be fascinating, right? Because a trousseau is not necessarily something done anymore, but oh, I love the idea of it. Yeah. It's problematic in like 37 different ways, but also personalized, new monogrammed everything when I go off and get married. Yes, fucking please. I am ready to start my life. Give me my trousseau.
Yes.
I guess that's what a bridal shower is for these days. I had a bridal shower in a book publishing conference room.
There you
go. Yeah, very spur of the moment, because my boss was decided that if nobody was going to throw me one, that just wasn't in my plans. I had other things going on. And I was a grown-up when I got married, so I kind of didn't need a microwave. But she was like, no. I will grandmother you about this. And so I had my own personal bridal shower that was overseen by a single Jewish woman, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
All comes back around.
It does. Anyway, not about me. Even though I like to talk about me, we'll go back to talking about Mary. Right. So, in addition to the 2 trousseau rooms, and in sort of a preview to what we're going to be talking about on our Patreon episode, she also added a fitting and alteration room and a shop for nurse and maid uniforms. And there were also over a dozen consulting rooms for individual futzing, which is kind of cool.
That is. Everybody likes to feel special and pampered. You know?
Yeah. And one cool thing about the in-house fitting and alterations room was once a year, she invited her customers to bring in clothing purchased from anywhere for freshening. So to be repaired and to be tailored and to be just spiffed up. And the store did it at a loss, but it gained them, like, because they were personally doing it in-house with their personal seamstresses, they were creating this relationship with those customers who would then see the quality and the personal interest taken in them.
That's some like Miracle on 34 stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool. That's Macy's, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. that Macy's is also quite an adventure. In a way more over-the-top way than a Macy's anywhere else is. Actually, I don't know. I think the pandemic might have taken that Macy's, though. Like, the Macy's.
I don't think so, because I think the parade still...
Well, Macy's still exists, but the flagship store might not.
But I think, doesn't it go past the flagship store?
Oh, yeah. There's an entire
area
that is Macy's.
Right. I think there's the area that the...
It's very Art Deco with all the big windows where all the Christmas stuff happens.
Right. I think all the Broadway shows that do performances for the parade stop and do it in front of the entranceway for the flagship store.
Yeah, there's an open area.
I could be
there.
wrong. But...
That would make sense. I don't know. I do not watch the parade since I live here.
Someday we will watch it live.
No. Absolutely not. No. Anyway, I don't actually know if the flagship store has died, so nobody panic and email me. It's probably still there. I feel like it ought to still be there. It would surprise me if they closed that one. Unrelated to Macy's. Let's get back to Mary Sachs department store because I just want to ramble. Right. So she continued to cultivate that personal, high quality and high-end atmosphere. And even though she was not designing herself, she was extremely particular about the quality and workmanship, there we go, that went into anything she sold. And if it wasn't up to her standards, it didn't come in. It just didn't. And she was very much of the mind that if you couldn't own and wear something for 3 years, then you've bought the wrong thing. So it was fashion, not trend.
Nice.
And yeah, there were a lot of interesting advertisements that she took out, like when short skirts happened and things like that. Gosh, I wish I could, hold on. I need to find this quote because it's so good.
Well, and there's definitely a certain amount of creativity and design aesthetic that goes into curating a store like that.
Oh, so absolutely.
Even though she wasn't a designer per se, she clearly had an eye for design.
Yeah. Oh, the actual direct quote about how much, or about being able to keep something is, if you can't wear a coat for 4 or 5 years, it was the wrong coat the day you bought it. Likewise with a suit, likewise with a dress. So that is the direct quote there.
Which is a philosophy I can totally get behind.
Yep, and in response to short skirts coming on the market, she wrote something that I think is interesting because it's less judgy than I would expect someone who very clearly wasn't interested in trendy anything. Mm-hmm. She was interested in classic fashion.
Yeah.
She wrote, "Don't be swayed by up to the minute if it isn't up to your standards." And, you know, the up being a play on the short skirt.
Yes, that is quite the...
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. And I guess she actually did the 2 or 3 times a year, which is a lot.
That is
so
a lot.
I guess seasonally, which is very cool.
Something like that would absolutely make me a customer for life.
Yeah, right? So by the 1950s, if you were shopping at Mary Sachs in Harrisburg, you could expect to be met by a doorman, and there was valet parking. And I feel like if you haven't experienced the weirdness that is old school New York City department stores, I highly recommend walking into one, but be prepared to be judged by the person who will hold the door for you.
Yeah.
Like, a lot. But there are still uniformed people who hold the door and are wearing white gloves. It's a very weird time travel-y sort of thing.
I can imagine.
And that's what I'm picturing here. So, combined, her Harrisburg and Lancaster stores employed a total of 175 employees by 1954.
Wow.
Again, single woman entrepreneur.
Badass.
Yeah. And the Harrisburg store would further expand its offerings to include a home goods section, a paper shop, and a candy shop. And a few doors down, Mary would also operate the 212 men's shop. I wonder if 212 is a reference to the area code of Manhattan.
Oh.
Maybe not. It might actually just be the literal address, since 210 is the other address. I don't know. I think that there weren't area codes at this point.
Oh, that's true. They didn't even have numbers, wasn't it? Like,
no, exchanges.
Yeah,
I
like
think.
Weirdness. Like, I am in awe. I am in awe of all of those operators with the plugs and the things and
the requirements, like the job listing requirements for telephone operators are amazing, and at some point I'm just going to find an excuse to read them all, because they are height and demeanor and nerves and like all of the things. But anyway, once again, back to Mary. Eventually, the Harrisburg store, the original location, would span an entire city block.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's extremely impressive.
Right? Yeah, that blows my mind. And unfortunately, Mary Sachs died of cancer on May 22nd, 1960, at the age of 72. She was still running everything until her death.
How have there not been like movies and books and
Oh, did I mention they hand delivered everything?
Oh my goodness.
And also, if you were housebound, would bring selections picked out specifically for you to try out in your home with a personal shopper.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so she did have, like I said, way at the beginning, sisters, and one of whom quit school at 15 to become a delivery person for her store. And I believe this was Hannah Sachs Cantor, who would become president of the business. And her sister, Yetta Sachs Carpenter, served as the secretary and treasurer and managed the Lancaster store. And Yetta had been managing the Lancaster store since 1927.
That's amazing.
So it is a family business owned and run by one woman entrepreneur who opened a store in 1918 at one of the worst possible times to open a store. And that store went strong and even expanded in the 1950s post-World War II. And, I mean, a lot of things were expanding then, but it does not seem to me that the shortages that happened during the war, like supply-wise, it did not seem to lessen the loyalty of her customers. And I will talk about how her store and uniforms are related in our Patreon episode. But it's really fascinating to see how flexible she was and how much she paid attention to the needs of women at the time. And she didn't try to bend them to her vision. She built her vision around taking care of their needs, which worked for her.
Because nobody else gave a shit.
Right?
I mean, that was a time period where women were not catered to. It's the husband of the house home. Not
right.
You know.
It wouldn't be until I think mid-50s, early 60s, when suddenly it would occur to advertising agencies on Madison Avenue. Also, very nearby. Fifth Ave, which is kind of funny. That it would occur to them that women were actually the people making financial decisions on a day-to-day basis in the household. Right. Which is also a whole interesting rabbit hole we won't go down.
The impact that she must have had, though.
Huge.
On how, not just locally, but on how things were done in New York, because you know people were watching her and picking up how she was successful and what she did and implementing some of that stuff.
Her way of doing business wasn't happening on Fifth Ave before she was doing it. And she would then bring in names recognizable from Fifth Ave to design her store and the interior and make everything as luxurious but also accessible to the, I mean, I assume that middle class and above are probably the people who could go there. But she was competing at that point not against other department stores and not even against the Fifth Ave stores. She was competing against literal dressmakers because it's at a time when it could have gone either way. You might have gotten your clothes made to measure, and you might have gotten your clothes off the rack and tailored. But it was one of the two. And so it's really interesting. And I would feel bad about the business being taken from the actual dressmakers, except that is where the industry was headed and there was no getting around it. So it was already
Plus, I'm sure she probably worked with some, you know what I mean? Or probably even employed some at some point, or, you know, like,
she had in-house tailoring.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine a vindictive you know what I mean? Like, she was a
serious businesswoman.
And
she did not take shit.
Right.
And she was known to be exacting. If you were an employee, but she does not seem to have been mean.
Right.
She seems to have been particular.
Take no shit, but do no harm.
Yeah, basically. And so to wrap up this little story, weeks after the Harrisburg store, the original, celebrated its 50th anniversary in 1968, the business was sold to a chain because her sister wanted to retire.
Yeah.
And it was sold to a local Pennsylvania chain department store called Hess's Department Store, which ran the store with Mary Sachs' name. It was renamed Hess's Mary Sachs. So it maintained her legacy, and they ran the store until it closed on September 2nd of 1978.
And again, that shows how much people respected her.
Yeah, and I mean, the building is there. The awning is there. And, I mean, she built that building. It was custom. Her name is in the stone. And, yeah.
Yeah.
She just seems like a fascinating lady. And that is one hell of a rabbit hole that I went down because my best friend liked a cape that some girl was wearing at a party after a concert.
But that's the exact rabbit hole to go down. I mean, like, that's the exact chain of events that make for a good rabbit hole.
Yeah. And I just started Googling, and then I couldn't find anything, and I had to wait until this afternoon and cross my fingers that this biography was going to arrive before we recorded, because that was where the research was, and it's a short biography. But, yeah, it is... like, wow, why don't we know about her? Or maybe people in fashion do know about her, and I was briefly in fashion, but
there should be more.
Yeah.
I feel like in 2020 we should create like a coloring book or booklet of sorts of the women that we cover.
You mean 2022?
Isn't that
not 2020?
Wow. Like I said, 2022.
Yeah, I don't... that's a lot of... Actually, no, there are good pictures of her. She does not... She looks exactly how you would expect her to look, but also way more specifically old lady frumpy than you would expect her to look. But she, like, her name was synonymous with elegance in her time. And she's obviously well-dressed and well-tailored, like the images of her.
Right.
But she's got, like, these little tiny glasses. And it's the glasses. It's entirely the glasses that are giving me the vibes. But anyway, I think she's really fascinating, and she seemed to be quite a character.
That was such a good story. I am fascinated now. I want to know more about her.
Well, I have good news. There's a biography.
I will be reading that biography because I'm hooked. I am hooked now.
Yeah. And there is, I mean, she was up to so much. Like, there are many things in Pennsylvania named after her. But that's sort of the wrap it up in a bow, sort of bite-sized, even though I've been talking for an hour version of her.
It certainly does not feel like that. That was such a good story. Thank you.
And her reputation was specifically as an honest saleswoman. And if someone tried to buy something and she didn't think that it either was the right fit or quality or style, she would tell them.
And that's why she got fired from her.
That is exactly
Don't ask
why.
Mary if you look fat in the pants. She's going to tell you.
And that description of Mary came directly from her sister Hannah. So, yeah.
Thank you for covering her and for introducing. That is so delightful and far more delightful than mine.
Yeah. Buckle in, friends.
Yeah. We're going to go for one of those just bumpy rides. Bumpy bump.
We're going to take a U-turn.
We are.
In progressive history.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway.
Uh-huh. Why don't you tell me a story?
I'm gonna tell you one that's gonna make you want to scream. So it's been almost 51 years since Coco Chanel allegedly said to her maid Celine, "You see, this is how you die." Then laid down on her bed in the Hotel Ritz and did precisely that. She was 87 at the time, and even if you know nothing of fashion, I'm willing to bet that you know of her, or of her name. Yeah. Coco was an incredibly groundbreaking woman, and at first glance, she seems to be like the ultimate rags to riches story. But she was also a proven fan of the Nazis and pretty much a Nazi agent. Boo. Which automatically makes her a shit human being in my eyes. Uh-huh. So, as with most things in life, especially when it comes to people with money and power, there are many sides and variations to the stories. Coco herself had changed up stories. And her life is definitely not an exception to that. Many discrepancies occur across many reputable sources, so I'm doing my best to cover her life as accurately as I can. So let's just get into her. Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel was born, was born August 19th, 1883, to Jean DeVol Chanel, also just plain known as Jean, a laundry woman in the charity hospital run by the Sisters of Providence, which was a poorhouse in Saumur. Oh. Which is in France. According to Coco Chanel, a biography by Axel Madsen published in 2009, her name was entered into the official registry incorrectly as Chasnel, Chsnel, most likely due to a clerical error. It was.
I have found so many of those recently.
Yeah. It also says that she went to her grave as Gabrielle Chasnel because to legally correct the misspelled name on her birth certificate would reveal that she was born in a poorhouse hospice. The fact that she came from, nothing is pretty much well known, though. And, I mean, her...
Yeah, but specifics of nothing is...
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's embarrassing, but I can see if you were snobby, you might.
Right. But her tombstone is correctly spelled. Her childhood is, I mean, it's a clear look at where a lot of her motivations came from and why she did some of the things she did, no matter which variation you look at. So, it was a year after she was born, and she was the second child, that her father would finally marry her mother. They would have...
Not a priority if you're in a poorhouse.
Right. And he was like a peddler. They would have 6 children together, and they all lived in a one-room lodging. Until the age of 11, well, Coco's age of 11, when her mother passed away at the age of 32. Now, none of the children had any kind of schooling up to that point, and there are variants of the how and the why the children were split up. But after her mother's death, Gabrielle's father sent the girls to the convent of Bobbins, which ran an orphanage, and the religious order that was connected to it was the Congregation of the Sacred Heart of Mary. And it was, quote, founded to care for the poor and rejected, including running homes for abandoned and orphaned girls. it was also very stark, very frugal, very demanding, very strictly disciplined. She remained there until she turned 18. Then she went to live at a boarding house for Catholic girls in the town of Moulins. Chanel herself rewrote her childhood several times over, with much more glamorous details that ranged from why her father abandoned her. One story she told was he sailed to America to seek his fortune and left her with her aunts.
Many people did.
Right. To alleging that she was actually born in 1893, like just shaving a decade off. And it's not hard to understand why she would do this. Regardless, it was at that orphanage that the woman now known as Coco learned to sew, and that skill would change her life. After she left the orphanage, she found work as a seamstress, but she always wanted to have her own real glamorous life. So she sang in a cabaret frequented by cavalry officers. And the stage is where she truly became known as Coco, but again, there's several variations as to where that Coco comes from. One was that her father called her that. The other was because she liked to sing a song called Who is Coco? And lastly, that it was an allusion to the French word cocotte, which means kept woman, which will make sense later on. Try as she may, though, she was never a star. She was just kind of mediocre in the singing department and the dancing. In fact, she was the only person.
It happens.
She was only the person that would entertain in between the actual stars to keep the audience engaged. Her wages,
she was the MC?
Pretty much. Her wages were only what she was able to earn from a hat that was passed around. It is also where another aspect of her was born. Coco was not what people of the times would consider a naturally beautiful woman, and her physique was looked at as being very boyish. Despite that, though, she learned how to work her charm and her youth to her advantage and began to captivate the military visitors. Her drive to become a star led her to move to Vichy, which was a known spa resort town, in 1906. And Vichy had numerous concert halls, theaters, and cafes that she was hoping would, launch her career. Spoiler alert, it did not. Coco would end up having to work at the Grand Grill, dispensing glasses of the allegedly curative mineral water that made Vichy renowned. So she was like a water girl. When the resort season ended, she returned to Moulins defeated and pretty much accepted that cabaret maybe just was not for her. And I have to believe that there came a day, though, where she was happy that it didn't work out, because that move back sparked the chain of events that would change her life and lead her to have a much bigger legacy than being a famous cabaret gal ever could have. So, at the age of 23, Coco met young French ex-cavalry officer and textile heir Etienne Balsan. And
you do.
Right, and she would live with him for the next 3 years. Now, this is where things get a little spicy. For those of you listening that may have watched the original Gossip Girl, this guy was pretty much the OG Chuck Bass. I can't think of another thing to equate him to. His chateau was huge and opulent, and he kept several courtesans. His new favorite being Coco. She actually, ironically, bumped a cabaret singer down the chain. He had very high society friends that were constantly visiting and, partying there. And it was a lifestyle of extreme self-indulgence. Balsan's wealth allowed the cultivation of a social set that reveled in partying and the gratification of human appetites, with all the implied accompanied decadence.
Yeah.
So it is said that several courtesans actually lived on the estate. There's talks of polyamory. It's spicy. So he showered her with all the baubles of rich life. She got diamonds and dresses and pearls. Biographer Justine Picardi, in her 2010 study, Coco Chanel, The Legend and the Life, suggests that Coco's nephew, Andre Palas, was supposedly the only child of her sister, Julia Barth, who had committed suicide. But Justine thinks that it was Chanel's own child with Bassan. And Andre did go on to inherit her entire estate along with his 2 own daughters. So, totally believable.
Interesting.
Yes. So while staying at the chateau, this new luxury life left Coco with a lot of downtime. Time that she spent using those sewing skills that she learned at the orphanage. You see, Coco realized that the current fashions of the day were both just uncomfortable and just did not work for her figure. She didn't want to sit side saddle while riding horses through the estate, and she really did like to ride. So she literally altered one of Balsan's riding outfits, pants, shirt, and tie, to fit her. She then decided the hats of the time were just too big and heavy, and she made herself a straw sun hat with the ribbon tied around it. Another one of my favorites during her time was she took one of Balsan's sweaters, cut it down the front, and added buttons, creating a cardigan. So she soon worked her magic in such a way that she was mysterious. She didn't care what other people thought in terms of, how she dressed and that she was bucking the system. She did, however, manage to use that mysteriousness so that everybody started wanting what she was wearing. I
can see that, sure.
Right? Especially if you're like, dude, I don't want to wear a corset. I want that. That shit looks comfortable.
And it does.
Right.
Frankly.
So in 1908, she began seeing one of Balsan's friends, Captain Arthur Edward Boy Capel.
Oh, wow.
Now, Coco would go on to refer to that time of her life as when two gentlemen were outbidding each other for my hot little body. And honestly, get it, Coco.
Fair enough.
Right, get it. Anywho, Capel was a wealthy member of the English upper class and a rather famous polo player. He would give Coco one of his apartments in Paris and set her up with her own shop based on how widely popular her little straw sun hat became. She became a licensed milliner in 1910 and opened a boutique at 21 Rue Cambon, Paris, named Chanel Modes. Well, she hoped Capel and her would settle down and have a life together. Yeah, he just could not keep it in his pants. And he clearly had some family duty to marry wealthy. And no matter how much success she had or what chateau she was found in, she just wasn't that. Their affair lasted 9 years, including after he married English aristocrat Lady Diana Wyndham in 1918. Capel would die in a car accident on the 22nd of December 1919. 25 years after the event, Chanel, who was at that time then residing in Switzerland, where she's actually buried, confided to her friend Paul Morand, "His death was a terrible blow to me. In losing Capel, I lost everything. What followed was not a life of happiness, I have to say." Coco's hats took off in 1913. She opened a boutique in Deauville, financed by Capel, where she introduced deluxe casual clothing suitable for leisure and sport. The fashions were constructed from humble fabrics like jersey and tricot, which at that time were primarily used for men's underwear. In fact, the first dress she constructed was from one of Capel's polo jerseys. The location was a prime one in the center of the town on a fashionable street. Here, Chanel sold hats, jackets, sweaters, and the marinière, which was the striped sailor blouse that she became famous for.
Oh, right. She did that.
Yeah. Coco had the dedicated support of two family members, her sister Antoinette and her paternal aunt Adrienne, who was of a similar age. Adrienne and Antoinette would parade through the town on its boardwalks on a daily basis, modeling her designs.
Oh, that's handy.
And it worked. It brought people in. In 1915, she was determined to recreate the success that she was having in Deauville and opened an establishment in Biarritz. It was close to wealthy Spanish clientele and also a playground for the wealthy that were exiled from their native countries by the war. This shop wasn't a traditional storefront, though. It was actually a villa opposite the casino there. By 1916, just 1 year after operation, it was so lucrative that she was able to completely reimburse Capel for his original investment.
Wow.
In 1918, Chanel purchased the building at 31 Rue Cambon in one of the most fashionable districts of Paris. By 1919, Chanel was registered as a couturier and established her maison de couture there. In 1921, she opened an early incarnation of a fashion boutique featuring clothing, hats, and accessories, and later expanded to offer jewelry and fragrances. So she's breaking grounds. She's doing really great. Speaking of fragrances, Chanel No. 5 was created in 1921. It was the first perfume to be named after a designer. The scent formula for the fragrance was compounded by French-Russian chemist and perfumer Ernest Beau. The design of its bottle has been an important part of the product's allure, and it's said that the iconic bottle was designed based on Chappelle's favorite whiskey decanter.
Oh, interesting.
Why is it named No. 5?
It does look like a whiskey decanter, actually.
It really does. So why No. 5? Now, according to the New York Times death announcement on January 11th, 1971, she had been told by a fortune teller that 5 was her lucky number. Another story says that the paths that led her to the cathedral for daily prayers when she was at the orphanage were laid out in circular patterns repeating the number 5. When presented with the small glass vials containing sample scents numbered 1 to 5 and 20 to 24 for her assessment, she chose the 5th vial. Coco told Ernest then, "I present my dress collections on the 5th of May, the 5th month of the year, and so we will let this sample number 5 keep the name it has already. It will bring good luck." And that it did. It made her millions. In fact, the perfume made her far more than her clothing did. The fragrance was also backed by department store owner Theophile Bader and businessmen Pierre and Paul Wertheimer, with Chanel developing a close friendship with Pierre. I use that term loosely because she does him dirty. Coco herself was the first face of the fragrance, appearing in the advertisement published by Harper's Bazaar in 1937. In 1925, Chanel introduced the now legendary Chanel suits with collarless jacket and well-fitting skirt, a la Jackie O. Her designs were revolutionary for the time, borrowing elements of menswear, emphasizing comfort over the constraints of then popular fashions. She really helped women say goodbye to the days of corsets and other confining garments. After another 1920 revolutionary 1920s design was Chanel's little black dress. She took a color once associated with mourning and showed just how chic it could be for evening wear. Like, up to this point, I'm pretty emphatically Team Coco. Like, she truly revolutionized fashion for women and she literally said, that's how men want us to dress. We should dress how we want to.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where I begin to want to just smack her. Yeah, so now it's where it just gets yucky. So, in 1923, Vera Bate Lombardi, allegedly the illegitimate daughter of the Marquess of Cambridge, offered Chanel entry into the highest levels of the British aristocracy. It was an elite group of associations revolving around such figures as politician Winston Churchill, aristocrats such as the Duke of Westminster, and royals such as Edward...
Marquess is just below Duke, right? Yeah. I said Marquess is just below Duke, right? Yes.
I believe so. In Monte Carlo in 1923, at the age of 40, she was introduced by Lombardi to the vastly wealthy Duke of Westminster, Hugh Richard Arthur Grosvenor, known to his intimates as Bendor. I don't want to know why. The Duke lavished her with extravagant jewels, costly art, and a home in London's prestigious Mayfair district. His affair with Chanel lasted 10 years. The Duke was an outspoken anti-Semite. He intensified or maybe created her inherent antipathy towards Jews. He shared with her and expressed extreme homophobia. In 1946, Chanel was quoted by her friend and confidant, again, Paul Moran, as saying, "Homosexuals? I've seen young women ruined by these awful queers. Drugs, divorce, scandal. They will use any means to destroy a competitor and to wreak vengeance on a woman. The queers want to be women, but they're lousy women."
What? Me?
Right? Using any means to destroy seems really fucking ironic now, let me tell you, Miss Chanel.
Has confusion.
And that friendship with Winston Churchill will prove to be one of the most important relationships of her life. So, yeah, anti-Semitism and homophobia are pretty much just the worst. So the Chanel Couture was a lucrative business enterprise, to say the least. It is said that she employed between 3,500 and 4,000 people, mostly women, by 1935. That count varies, but it's still a lot. As the 1930s progressed, though, her place on the throne of haute couture was threatened. The boyish look and the short skirts of the 1920s flapper kind of disappeared overnight. More significantly, though, she began to be eclipsed by her premier rival, the designer Elsa Schiaparelli. Schiaparelli's innovative designs were... So Chanel's known for being very classic, very basic, very...
just very no frills.
Right. Schiaparelli was really into, like, playful references to surrealism. And that was garnering critical acclaim and generating enthusiasm in the fashion world. So feeling that she was losing her avant-garde edge, Chanel collaborated with Jean Cocteau on his theater piece, Oedipe Rex. The costumes that she designed, though, were mocked and critically, like, just blasted. And I quote...
That is a complicated play to...
Oh, yeah. So, and I quote, Wrapped in bandages, the actors look like ambulant mummies or victims of some terrible accident. She was also involved in the costuming of Bacchanal, a Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo production. The designs were actually made by Salvador Dali. However, due to the declaration of war by Great Britain on September 3rd, 1939, the ballet was forced to leave London, and they left the costumes in Europe and were remade according to Dali's initial designs by another designer, Karinska.
That's messy.
Yeah. So in 1939, at the beginning of World War II, she closed her shops. Now, she said that it was not a time for fashion, which, you know, at face value would seem respectful, but that wasn't really her motive. According to her biographer, Hal Vaughan, he suggests that Chanel used the outbreak of the war as an opportunity to retaliate against those workers who had struck for higher wages and shorter work hours in the French general labor strike of 1936.
Doesn't she know what happens when you make French laborers mad?
Apparently not. She didn't give a shit. So, closing her couture house, she pretty much made a definitive statement on her political views. Her dislike of Jews, reportedly sharpened by her association with the society elites, had solidified her beliefs. She shared with many of her circle a conviction that Jews were a threat to Europe because of the Bolshevik government in Soviet Union, and all of that just really hurts to say.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad we're on the same page.
So, during the German occupation, Chanel resided at the Hotel Ritz. It was noteworthy as the preferred place of residence for upper echelon German military staff. During this time, she had a romantic liaison with Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage.
That's an unfortunate name.
Right? A German aristocrat and member of Dinklage noble family. He served as a diplomat in Paris and was former Prussian army officer and attorney general who had been an operative in military intelligence since 1920, and he is the one who paid for and procured her arrangements at the Ritz.
Oh, how nice.
Right? Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel and the Secret War, written by Hal Vaughan, further solidifies the consistencies of the French intelligence documents released by describing Coco as a vicious anti-Semite who praised Hitler.
Ew.
Yeah. World War II, specifically the Nazi seizure of all Jewish-owned property and business enterprises, provided her with the opportunity to try to gain full monetary fortune generated by Parfums Chanel and its most profitable product, Chanel No. 5. Because she, at the time, I want to say the original contract, she was only making 10% off the sales. And that was just for the use of her name, pretty much. So the directors of Parfums Chanel, which were the Wertheimers, were Jewish. And Chanel used her position as a Aryan to petition German officials to legalize her claim to sole ownership.
Ew.
Oh, yeah. On May 5th, 1941, she wrote to the government administrator charged with ruling on the disposition of Jewish financial assets. Her grounds for proprietary ownership were based on the claim that Parfums Chanel is still the property of Jews. There's air quotes around that. And had been legally abandoned by the owners.
What?
Mm-hmm. She wrote, I have an indisputable right of priority. The profits that I have received from my creation since the foundation of this business are disproportionate, and you can help to repair in the part of the prejudices I have suffered in the course of these 17 years. So what her anti-Semitic ass was unaware of, though, was that the Wertheimers anticipated the forthcoming Nazi mandates against the Jews, and back in May of 1940, legally turned control of Parfum Chanel over to Felix Amiot, who was a Christian French businessman and industrialist. And at the war's end, he returned Parfum Chanel to the hand of the Wertheimers.
Because he is not an asshole. Or
Right.
at least not in that way. I don't know anything else about him.
Just the fact that he fucked over Coco on this shit, just, yes.
Oh, that's just so gross.
Oh, it gets worse. Unfortunately, though, this put them in the Wertheimers in a shitty position post-war, because she would continue to battle for more profits. Now, exposing her...
go away, Coco.
Right. Exposing her Nazi activity would have allowed them to win the battle and, put this to bed. But it would also tarnish her name, and her name is what sold that perfume.
Oh.
As such, be prepared to get real mad. They would get completely screwed over on the new deal that they struck. On May 17th, 1947, Chanel received wartime profits from the sale of Chanel No. 5, an amount equivalent to $9 million, I believe. Her future share would be 2% of all Chanel No. 5 sales worldwide. The financial benefit to her would be enormous. Her earnings were projected at $25 million a year, making her one of the richest women in the world at the time. In addition, they would pay all of Chanel's living expenses, from the trivial to the large,
What?
for the rest of her life.
What? No, why?
Because she is a bitch.
Man, what an asshole.
Right? In his book, Vaughn establishes that Chanel committed herself to the German cause as early as 1941 and worked for General Walter Schellenberg, chief of the German intelligence agency. I'm going to butcher this, and I apologize, but only a little bit, because fuck the Nazis. Sicherheitsdienst, I think.
Sicherheitsdienst?
Sure.
It's safety. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's safety. Sicherheitsness. Yes.
Them
safety.
fuckers. And the military...
Or security.
Nazis make me drop a lot of F-bombs.
Well, that's fine. I'm only here to speak the German, not praise the Nazis.
And the military intelligence spy network Abwehr, ABWEhr, A-B-W-E-H-R.
Abwehr.
At the Reich Security
Or
main office
where?
in Berlin.
It's Abwehr.
Abwehr. Nope.
I need to see it written. But
at the end of the war, Schellenberg was tried.
Abwehr.
At the end of the war, Schellenberg...
Sorry.
Huh?
No, I'm done.
So Schellenberg was tried by the Nuremberg Military Tribunal and was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment for war crimes.
Bye-bye.
He was released in 1951 owing to an incurable liver disease and took refuge in Italy.
Oh, fuck off.
Chanel paid for Schellenberg's medical care and living expenses, financially supporting his wife and family, and paid for Schellenberg's fucking funeral upon his death in 1952.
Wasn't somebody else paying for her expenses? Meaning
Right.
they were also paying for that?
She literally pretty much made Jews pay for that.
Man, what a fuckface.
Seriously. In late 2014, French intelligence agencies declassified and released documents confirming Coco Chanel's role with Germany in World War II.
That's gross.
Working as a spy, Chanel was directly involved in a plan for the Third Reich to take control of Madrid. Such documents identify Chanel as an agent in the German military intelligence, the Abwehr. Yes. That one.
Or Abwehr. Sorry.
Chanel visited Madrid in 1943 to convince the British ambassador to Spain, Sir Samuel Orr, a friend of Winston Churchill, about a possible German surrender once the war was leaning towards an Allied victory. One of the most prominent missions she was involved in was Operation Model Hut. Operation Model Hat. Her duty
Model
was... Hut. That's right. Mein Hut hat Dreiecken. Her duty was to act as a messenger from Hitler's foreign intelligence to Churchill to prove that some of the Third Reich attempted peace with the Allies. That's air quoting right there. 1943.
Oh, did they?
Chanel traveled to the RSHA in Berlin, otherwise known as the Lion Den, with her liaison and old friend, the German embassy in Paris press attaché, Baron Hans-Gunther von Dinklage. Apparently he was also known as Sparrow among his friends and colleagues. I don't want to know. So Dinklage was all
upper class schoolboy nicknames are an entire thing.
So Dinklage was also a collaborator for the German SD. Chanel and Dinklage were to report to Schellenberg at the RSHA with a plan that Chanel had proposed to Dinklage. She, Coco Chanel, was to meet Churchill and persuade him to negotiate with the Germans. In late 1943 or early 1944, it's a little sketchy, Chanel and her SS superior Schellenberg, who had a weakness for unconventional schemes, devised a plan to get Britain to consider a separate peace to be negotiated by the SS.
Okay.
When interrogated by British intelligence at the war's end, Schellenberg maintained that Chanel was a person who knew Churchill sufficiently to undertake political negotiations with them. For that mission, with the Operation Model Hat, they also recruited...
Chanel... When did she become an expert in politics?
She wasn't an expert in politics, but remember she made friends with Churchill?
She's a bag of dicks.
Yes, she is. And they also recruited Vera Bate Lombardi, who is the one, if you remember, that brought Chanel into the fold, so to speak. So Count Joseph von Lederber-Wichlen.
I don't know. I would have to see the spelling.
I don't even... You know what? I honestly don't give a fuck if I'm pronouncing Nancy names wrong. I don't.
I mean, you are, but I don't know what the name is.
It's fine. A Nazi agent who defected to the British Secret Service... Okay, I guess he's all right. In 1944, recalled a meeting he had with Dinklage in early 1943, in which the Baron had suggested including Lombardi as a courier. Dinklage purportedly said. So, unaware of their true intentions, Lombardi was actually led to believe that the forthcoming journey to Spain would be a business trip exploring the potential for establishing Chanel Couture in Madrid. Lombardi acted as an intermediary, delivering a letter written by Chanel to Churchill to be forwarded to him by the British Embassy in Madrid. Schellenberg's SS liaison officer, Captain Walter Cushman, acted as bagman and was told to deliver a large sum of money to Chanel in Madrid. Ultimately, the mission was a failure for the Germans. British intelligence files reveal that the plan collapsed after Lombardi, on arrival in Madrid, proceeded to denounce Chanel and others to the British embassy as Nazi spies. She was like, fuck no.
Oops.
Yeah, so good on her. In September of 1944, Chanel was interrogated by the Free French Purge Committee, the Pierson. The committee had no documented evidence of her collaborative activities and was obliged to release her at that time. According to Chanel's grandniece, Gabrielle Place Lebruni, when Chanel returned home, she said, "Churchill had me freed." The extent of Churchill's intervention for Chanel after the war became a subject of much gossip and speculation. Some historians claim that people worried that if Chanel were forced to testify about her own activities at trial, that she would expose the pro-Nazi sympathies and activities of certain top-level British officials, which were members of that elite society that she got involved with, and the royal family.
Oh, well, the royal family does have some problematic...
yeah, absolutely.
Problematic problems?
Vaughan writes that some claim that Churchill instructed Duff Cooper, British ambassador to the French provisional government, to protect Chanel. Chanel's friend and biographer Marcel Heydrich said of her wartime interaction with the Nazi regime, if one took seriously the few disclosures that Mademoiselle Chanel allowed herself to make about those black years of the occupation, one's teeth would be set on edge. When Vaughan's book was published in August of 2011, his disclosure of the contents of recently declassified military intelligence documents generated considerable controversy about Chanel's activities. Maison de Chanel issued a statement, portions of which were published by several media outlets. Chanel Corporate refuted the claim of espionage, while acknowledging the company officials had read only media excerpts of the book.
Wow, plausible deniability. What?
Right? The Chanel group stated, "What is certain is that she had a relationship with a German aristocrat during the war. Clearly, it wasn't the best period to have a love story with a German, even if Baron von Dinklage was English by his mother, and she, Chanel, knew him before the war."
Baron von Dinklage.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all.
In an interview given to the Associated Press, author Vaughan discussed the unexpected turn of his research. "I was looking for something else, and I came across this document saying Chanel's a Nazi agent. Then I really started hunting through all of the archives in the United States, in London, in Berlin, and in Rome, and I came across not one, but 20, 30, 40 absolutely solid archival materials on Chanel and her lover, Hans Gunther von Dinklage, who was a professional spy." Vaughan also addressed the discomfort many felt with the revelations provided in his book. "A lot of people in this world don't want the iconic figure of Gabrielle Coco Chanel, one of France's greatest cultural idols, destroyed. This is definitely something that a lot of people would have preferred to put aside, to forget, to just go on selling Chanel scarves and jewelry. But I, for one, cannot ignore it. I can't."
No.
So
Ew.
that is the disgusting turn of events that make me sad. It breaks my heart that somebody who did do a lot of good and I can understand, I can see the motives of so much of her actions.
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where it's just unjustifiable. It is unjustifiable. To even if nothing came forth about her being a Nazi spy, which there are plethora of documents.
Yeah.
How dirty she did the brothers that believed in her enough to back her perfume alone makes her a shit human being.
Right?
And you could save 50 babies from a burning building, but the second that you turn around and would have just millions of people killed, just
Ew.
no. Like, no. I would like to believe that I would have done whatever I could to stand up against the atrocities. I sure as fuck would not have been. And I get people have survival instincts, but this is more than survival. She had more than enough money to get her ass out of there. And there were other designers that fled Paris, and I will cover that a little bit more in our Patreon episode. That fled Paris before this happened, that closed their shops and left. She had options. She had enough means and privilege to GTFO and not have to do those things.
Agreed.
So
she knew what she was doing.
Right. I hate that I loved her perfume, and I hate that I loved her designs. Like, I hate any...
I do too, because they're classic.
Right.
And, I mean, sometimes it sucks a lot when you learn about the people you think are interesting.
Yeah, it's that whole never meet your hero thing, I guess. So that is the disheartening truth of Coco Chanel. And it's hard because I do want to go back and read more about before she turned into, well, not turned into, because clearly that was already there. It's so hard. It's so hard because there is good stuff there. But
yeah,
nothing can justify the shitty behavior.
No. Ew.
Right.
Yeah. So, bringing it back to not Nazis.
Oh, yeah.
How do you not want to die this week?
It's the weekly worst way to die. That is a good
weekly
one.
Worst way to die.
Let's see. My weekly worst way to die would be... I'm trying not to go dark. I'm trying not to take it dark.
I mean, if you're... Whatever, get dark.
Being turned over by somebody that I thought was a friend.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that is the worst.
Yeah. That's my worst way to die this week.
You know, it's kind of weird that Beauty Shop Fire is the light-hearted version of this.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Beauty School Fire. No.
I
trying to lift it back up.
Something go back to high school.
Oh, and her name was Frenchie. Look at that. Oh, that's bad. Oh.
Yeah.
You know what? You do want to be spooky internet friends for more wonderfully horrible puns? You can find us at Bones and Bobbins on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, eventually TikTok. I mean, we're like there. We just haven't done anything yet. I need to coerce my offspring into creating some things. But you can also just find us at bonesandbobbins.com.
It's true. And we have to wrap it up because for reasons unclear, my spouse won't stop pacing in the kitchen.
It happens.
It does. Although he just stopped doing that and walked by just now because the last 5 minutes couldn't. Anyway. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast, even if you can hear my spouse pacing around in the background. It pleases the internet gremlins, and that's how we show up in recommendations so that other morbid souls can find us.
Bring forth the morbid souls.
All of them.
All of them. And on that note, let us leave you with some advice that you should never forget. Lock your doors.
And don't run with scissors.
Also, fuck Nazis.
Yeah, definitely fuck Nazis.
Each episode of the Bones and Bobbins podcast is written and researched by Haley Pierson-Cox and Natalie Hoyce. Our music was composed by Loyalty Freak Music. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bones and Bobbins. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, or check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts so you won't miss a minute of our strange and creepy content.